Let me put these down so I don't get toppled by books. Ooh. Okay, so these are the books that I have read in January, apart from the one on my Kindle as well. I read a total of 6 books this month. January was actually a really, really good reading month for me. I think I read some really great books, and it's kind of just widened my taste of what books I enjoy reading. And I always appreciate that. I like branching out. So yeah, we've got a few of those in here. We've got a few that I didn't really like so much. If you guys read my reading vlogs, what? If you guys watched my other videos in January, you guys know that I did a 24-hour readathon as well as a reading vlog. So you guys probably already know what I read. There are a couple other books though that you guys either didn't see me read or you only saw me read parts of, but you did not get my full impression of the book. So we're gonna go over everything today. So before we start, you guys should probably know how I rate my books. I noticed that if I rate off of feel for a book, I typically will have a different feeling and therefore a different rating if I come back to the book at a later date. So I nixed that, and instead I created an objective rating system for the books that I read. So basically how I rate now is I give 1 star for each category that I find relevant to making a good book. So the first category is characters. Are the characters relatable? Are they fascinating, interesting? Do they have a good character arc, a good backstory? Are they pretty consistent within their personality, their character traits? Are they developed well enough to where they feel like they are truly people that I'm reading about? The next star that I give is for the plot. Is the plot plotting? Does it make sense, or are there plot holes? Is the plot interesting? Is it new? Is it unique? Is it the same old plot that we have gotten in other books, or is it maybe similar but then it has some different qualities? Then I look at the writing style, which is a whole nother star that I will rate. Is the writing style easy to follow along with? Is it fluid? Is it effective in telling the story? Is it descriptive? Is it detailed enough to where I can follow along with the plot and the characters and really, really get my fill and be immersed in the book itself? The final 2 are engagement and enjoyment, which seem pretty similar. However, in my head, they're not. So engagement to me means like, am I interested in continuing to read? Am I interested enough and engaged enough to want to continue to turn the pages? Am I engaged enough to really want to know where the story is going and be captivated until I finish the book? Overall enjoyment is kind of like how I would previously rate books. Just, did I enjoy it? Did I enjoy overall the vibes, the aesthetic, the storyline? Did I have anything really stick with me that I'm going to be thinking about after the book? Throughout the book, was I enjoying my time reading it, or were there times where maybe I kind of lost interest? Maybe I was still engaged, but I was like, oh, I'll keep reading, but I'm lacking that oomph factor of, this is a really great book. So that is my rating system. If a book is 5 stars, then it got a star in each category. If the book is extra, extra special, and I cannot seem to get it out of my head and I am obsessed with it, perhaps I will rate it 6 stars. Otherwise, this is going to be my 5-star requirement. Anything less than that, I will divvy up and go ahead and rate it accordingly. Okay, so now we're caught up on how I rate my books, so let's go ahead and get into the books that I read in January. The first book that I read in January was Apprentice to the Villain by Nicole Maeher. This is the second book in the Assistant and the Villain series. I'm not going to get too much into the synopsis of this book in particular, because if you haven't read Assistant to the Villain, which is the first book in the series, then you're not caught up with what's going on in this book. But basically, the premise of the series is that we follow along Evangelina Sage, otherwise known as Evie, who is a young woman and the primary breadwinner of her family for her ill father and her younger sister. She then responds to a job posting for becoming the assistant to this villain who has been kind of terrorizing the kingdom in which the story takes place. This book is a very fast-paced fantasy world. It kind of reminded me of Disenchantment, where it's just very lighthearted. It just kind of throws you into the fantasy world, and there's not really much world building in it. It's just the world is what the world. You know what I mean? There's just, it's a fantasy world. There's a lot of quirky kind of characters, a lot of just lighthearted moments. And this is why I view it very similarly to Disenchantment, because although there are high stakes scenes, the overall vibe of the book is very lighthearted and carefree. It's very, very enjoyable. There is a slow burn kind of romance in this book. It's kind of grumpy sunshine trope, which I didn't really know that I liked that trope, but I actually do. I really enjoyed reading about the villain and Evie. Their dynamics were just witty banter, very cutesy, very fun. Yeah, this book just got me. I really am enjoying this series, and I cannot wait until the next book comes out later this year. So I rated this book 4 stars. I thought it was really, really well written. Hold on. Let me consult with my reading journal. I gave it a full star for characters. I thought, again, the characters were just really well done. They have their personalities, they have these traits that are withstanding throughout both of the books, and I enjoyed that. As the characters grow and change, they are kind of grappling with their own changes in themselves. And I just really enjoyed how Nicole Maeher did this so eloquently in this book. Just the characters noticing that they are changing and they are growing, and how they're dealing with their growth. I found it just enjoyable and very relatable. So characters got 1 star. So I gave the plot a 0.5 star. You know, it's a typical like revenge trope, I guess. Like there's not really, there's not really much else going on. It's pretty stereotypical, I guess. The writing style I also gave a 0.5. Nicole Maeher is a very new author, and I think that she did a wonderful debut with this series. I'm very excited to read more of her work. She's just a very fun writer. I think that there are times though where the pacing was a little too fast-paced, and slowing it down in certain scenes would have made for a really epic kind of a read. The dialogue was wonderful. It was great. I think she has a really, really great knack for writing dialogue, because again, it's just witty, it's charismatic, it's funny, it's just great. It's just great. However, I do think it would have been nice to have a bit more descriptions, considering that the book takes place in a fantasy world. I do think she did a great job just throwing us in, and the plot doesn't necessarily rely on the world building of itself. It's really more of a character-driven story than a plot-based story, and she did a really awesome job with that. There was just certain things, because it was in a fantasy world, it would have been nice just to have a little bit more descriptions of that world, not even necessarily world building, but just like what things looked like, or what other things might have been like going on in scenes when there was a lot of dialogue. For engagement and enjoyment, I gave both of these categories 1 star. I was definitely engaged. Like there was just so much happening. Again, very fast-paced read, so there was so much happening, so many different things that we saw in the world itself, which were new beasts and new characters. There were betrayals, there's like new blooming romances forming, new friendships forming. I don't want to say more, but that's about it for engagement. Overall enjoyment was, I greatly enjoyed this book. I think, again, it was just such a fun read, easy to get into. It kept me smiling, it kept me laughing throughout the book. It was just a really great read. The next book I read was Brain on Fire by Susannah Cahalan. I also read this book for my 24-hour readathon. I chose it literally just because it was short. I'm not really a big fan of like nonfiction or memoirs, but this is a memoir. This book has been on my shelf for a very, very long time. If I didn't do the 24-hour reading challenge, I probably would have never picked this up, because again, just not my type of a read. So this book follows 24-year-old Susannah, who is working currently at her dream job at a New York newspaper. She has lovely friends. She's close with her family. She also has a boyfriend as well, who seems really great. We didn't really get too much of him, but he seems great. And we follow along as she starts to have an onset of various erratic symptoms like seizures. She has these major mood swings where she's not acting quite like herself. She experiences numbness in her body, some delusions, and because of all these symptoms, it is then Susannah and her family's trek to find out what is actually going wrong with her medically and how to fix it. So I rated this book 3.5 stars. I enjoyed reading most of the book. I think towards the end though, it got a little preachy on the educational aspects and the road of entrepreneurship that Susannah goes down after her recovery. I really appreciated that they got their facts right. I wish I kind of read this book when I was in my undergrad and I actually took a neurobiology class. I think that the way that things are explained in this book, just in terms of brain functioning and the illness that she has itself, was spot on. The facts are correct. Like, you didn't even have to have any previous understanding of neurobiology in order to pick up this book and to understand what they were saying. I gave 1 star for characters, I think obviously because it is a memoir and the characters are not just characters, but they are real people. For the plot, I gave this a 0.5. I think for the purpose of telling this story of what it is like to fearfully have something wrong with you and going down the path to getting the care that you need while also no one really knows what it is that's wrong with you was very gripping. And I could feel myself getting anxious because I didn't even know what was wrong with her. I was like, what is wrong with her? And so it definitely just captivated me from the get-go. And then throughout the story, as she does find out kind of what is wrong with her and she has all these tests done and she's in and out of the hospital and her parents are worried and the relationships that she has become strained, or you know, she becomes very dependent upon them as well. It was just such a fascinating plot of going through the fear of medical turmoil and the resilience that comes from knowledge, hope, and family supports that actually gets you through it and into recovery. I loved that plot. I think that, however, there was also a lot of regurgitation of information towards the end of the book, and I didn't really think it was needed. I did give 1 star for writing. I think that Susannah Cahalan did a great job in this memoir of just writing it in a way that it felt like it was a fictional book. It was very, very engaging from the get-go, and she did a great job. So I gave both engagement and enjoyment a 0.5 stars because, again, at the end, it just kind of lost me. It just kind of got a little stale. There were certain relationship dynamics that I just wondered about, and I think it would have been cool if she had kind of been a little bit more descriptive of what happened with those areas of her life. We kind of got hints of that. We got certain scenes of her relationships, like with her mom and her brother, and I really enjoyed that. I wondered more about her friends a little bit more, as well as her boyfriend. Again, I'm not a memoir or nonfiction reader, so the way that I'm rating this is as if it was a fiction book, and so I don't think I'm doing this book justice, just FYI. If you like memoirs or you like nonfictions, I think you'd probably love this book. Even if you like fictions and you're trying to get into nonfictions and memoirs, you'll probably really like it. Like, I definitely enjoyed it. I would recommend it. Okay, the next book, which was my favorite book out of this month, was no other than Peaches and Honey. In this book, we follow along a young woman named Anna who is living in the year of 1184 in England. And she meets an unusual stranger who ends up gifting her an immortal peach. From then on, we follow Anna's life on Earth over the course of 800 years of various places in the world. She not only discovers these immortal truths, wherein there are different kinds of like gods or goddesses, of that I'm not really sure, but they are immortal beings that are walking around amongst the mortal world. There is a shape-shifting god that is a love interest named Chiron, who Anna has a very gentle and slow burn kind of romance there with him. If you're reading this book for romance, I would say it's not heavy on the romantic aspect. It's more so heavy on the historical time periods in which the book takes place. As we follow Anna throughout the next 800 years, there's this major theme of just ceaseless anthropogenic brutality, as well as just the fluxes of life itself. Life and death and illness and despair and tragedy. It's so good. It reminds me of like Forrest Gump, like when Forrest just come across very historical moments in time. And that is literally kind of what happens to Anna. She ends up being there for very important historical moments. She's there during witch burning, she's there during the Civil War, the World War II, she's there in the Soviet Union. The book was so intricately written where I'm not a big historical fan. I don't really like it, but the way that Raeta did it, where it flowed so seamlessly within the plot itself of immortality and kind of grappling with the torment that humans and life on Earth faces. It's just so ensnaring. It was a really, really great read. Alongside all the historical influences, there's a lot of magical realism. Anna is also a character who has this role of being a helper, and it's kind of her own journey as well to kind of overcome her being so tightly wound by her role as a helper and learning for herself how to love herself and help herself as well. Throughout the book, we can see this slow progression of her accepting that that's a part of herself, but her also kind of disengaging with it and eventually getting to the point where she has a healthy bout of like selfishness, which I really enjoyed for her character. I thought it was a great choice for her character arc and for the journey that she's been through in the entirety of the book. I ate this book up. If you have not read this book, please go and read this book. I obviously gave Peaches and Honey 5 stars. I thought it was a wonderful read. It got 1 star for every category. I really enjoyed the characters of Anna and Chiron. I thought that they just felt so real. They were so distinguished in morals and values. Everything they did made sense. The characters are so developed. The plot, again, freaking brilliant. It kind of reminded me a little bit of The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. It wasn't the same, but if you like The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, you probably would like this book. So I was kind of hesitant to give the writing a full star, especially in the beginning. Since the book itself is so similar to The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, V.E. Schwab's writing is so immaculate, and I don't think it's an easy writing style that can be topped. Raeta, especially in the beginning of reading Peaches and Honey, I didn't really enjoy her writing style in the beginning. I thought it was very quipped. But as the story progressed, I see why Raeta may have chosen to write like this, because it didn't need it. Like, the book itself did not need extra descriptions. It did not need extra feelings. The way it was written was just perfect for the story itself and the plots and the themes to really get across to the readers. So as I continued reading it, the more I appreciated how the book was written. Of course, it got 2 stars for engagement and enjoyment. I was so thoroughly engaged in this book. When I wasn't reading, like, I just wanted to read more. The whole book itself was just so enjoyable to me. Okay, the next books, as you guys probably already know, was Fourth Wing and Iron Flame. I don't even know if I should give a synopsis because it's just so overhyped and talked about consistently in the book community. It takes place in this fantasy world. We follow along the main character, Violet, who attends this war college called Basgiath, and she's learning how to become a ruthless, cutthroat dragon rider. There is some romance, obviously. I think I had a lot of expectations going into this book. My expectations, I think, were too high. I thought that I would enjoy this book so thoroughly, and I just didn't. I think it really fell flat in a lot of areas for me. So overall, I rated Fourth Wing 2.5 stars, and I rated Iron Flame 2.75 stars. I want to say that although these books didn't live up to the hype, the premise of the book was really, really great. I think the world building was awesome too, and it was so cool, I think, to be a part of this world for the time that I read it. I also think, though, that the execution of literally pretty much everything was lacking. I gave a 0.5 stars for characters. I felt that the characters could have been developed more. I wanted more backstory. I wanted more, if you are this person, show me you're this person. I didn't really understand really any of the characters. I'm getting worked up. Like, we were told a lot of things. Let me just make that clear. We were told a lot about a lot of things in this book and not really shown. The plot I gave 0.5. I think the plot didn't really start plotting until the end of the first book. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know. The writing I gave a 0.5. Again, I think Yarros did a wonderful job in the world building, and I know that she probably put so much time into creating the world, into organizing the school into quadrants and the teachers and the squad sections and the wing leaders and squad leaders, and it was like, and it would have been so cool to really understand that organization. Information was just really given to us very sparsely throughout the book. This is stressful trying to talk about these books. It reminds me of like if you were in high school biology, the teacher is going over like how cells work, but really the only takeaway is like the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. But yet there's like so many other parts of the cell that are required for it to function and that do different things. That is also information that you need to know if you go further on in any biology courses. Yeah, it's like we got the mitochondria of the cell, but then we needed all this other information to move the story forward. We didn't get that. And now we're in like biology 303 with Onyx Storm, and it's like, what is happening? I don't know. I know the mitochondria. My engagement for Fourth Wing was a 0.25. Yeah, so engagement was pretty low. Enjoyment was a 0.5. Again, like the majority of the book, I didn't really think it needed to be there. I didn't really enjoy it. So for Iron Flame, I gave the characters 0.25. I thought that by this book, I would have more backstory and understanding of the characters. Like, the characters are fine. I just wanted more. I wanted to know more about them. I wanted them to have a little bit more different characteristics and traits. Some of the characters just kind of seem to blend together for me, and I'm like, I don't know which one's which. The characters seem very interchangeable to me. They weren't developed enough. I don't know. They weren't developed enough. I think too, like with the writing as well, which I gave a 0.5. The plot I actually gave a 1 for this one. I think the plot's finally plotting, and so I can get behind that. But the writing for this one, again, just silly scenes, lots of drama, lots of stuff I just don't understand. I felt very blind in this series. I'm just hating on it. I'm sorry, but this is how I feel. Engagement and enjoyment were 0.5. I was very engaged through the first half of the book. A lot was happening. A lot of cool stuff was going on. It was very thrilling and suspenseful to read about. So I enjoyed that. And then overall enjoyment, I think overall I really like the vibe and the atmosphere that this book has. That's what I'll say. Okay, so the last book that I read in January was Grey Dog by Elliot Gish. It is a horror novel that takes place in 1901 as we follow along the main character Ada Bird, who is a spinster and a school teacher that gets a new post in this quaint town named Lowry Bridge. As Ada goes into this new town and this new job, she slowly makes new friends, she meets her students, and some weird things start happening. The story is told from her journal entries that she writes each day, and eventually as she kind of has these weird occurrences in the town, she finds out about this paranormal entity known as the Grey Dog that may or may not be afflicting her. So as you read along, you're kind of questioning, is Ada just an unreliable narrator and she is actually just going mad? Or is it the Grey Dog at work? If you're not into horror genres, you'd probably be fine with this book. It didn't really read to me as a horror book. It read to me more as like a paranormal psychological thriller. I mean, there were gruesome scenes in there, but it didn't really read as a horror. Like, I wasn't ever terrified. It was more of this steady, slow burn kind of eeriness that took place in the book, and not, oh, okay, this is frightening. I just didn't read like a horror. I don't know. It just didn't for me. There's some tormented characters. There's a lot of like unhinged female rage. I think the time frame too, being that the book takes place in 1901, was quite fascinating. I'm not really a big reader of going back in time, and yet like two of my favorite books this month took place primarily back in time, and I actually really enjoyed them. So I begs the question of like what I really like these days. So I rated this book actually 4 stars, which I was really surprised about. I gave a 0.75 for characters. They felt so real. Like every time I picked up the book or thought about the book, the characters really came to life. The only reason why I rated it 0.75 for characters, it's strictly for the fact that it is 2025 and I am a woman in my 20s reading this book. And I just can't get behind some of the ways that the characters interacted or their thought processes on things. But again, that could just be because of the time difference and have nothing to do with the characters, and it's just my take on it. I don't know. The plot itself, I gave a 1. I think that, I mean, I can't spoil anything, but I think by the end, especially like within the feminine rage aspect, the unhinged feminine rage really came to light at the end of the book. I mean, it kind of veered towards the direction of a complete dismissal of gender roles in society at the time frame, as well as those rules and roles that the main character Ada placed upon herself. I think there's like a lot of literary merit to this book, which I wasn't expecting because again, horror, like wasn't expecting it, but there is. Like towards the end I was like, wow, there's a lot of symbolic scenes that transpire. The writing style as well, again, this is Elliot Gish's debut novel, so I've never read any of her works, but I would totally read another one of her books again. I think that she just did a phenomenal job writing this story. The writing style really took me back and immersed me into 1901 in this quaint little town. It was almost like watching a movie. Like the characters were right in front of me and I was there, and it was eerie. A lot of like deranged moments, disturbing scenes. So for engagement, I rated it 0.5. And for the purpose of the plot, it really, really worked out well. Like I couldn't imagine it being written in any other way. However, there were kind of on and off moments where the book really caught my attention and hooked me in. And then there were other moments where I was just kind of like, oh, okay, like it's just kind of like a normal scene of people talking back in the day. And it was still fascinating, the dialogue and what was being discussed in the book and the mannerisms, how the scenes developed. Again, fascinating because of the time period. However, it wasn't like the most engaging or entertaining thing. My overall enjoyment of the book, I did rate it a 0.75. I think those scenes that did engage me had me enjoying it. Again, just the themes in this book, it hits a spot where it's like, wow, I have a lot to take away from this book, and I really, really enjoyed that. Anyways, you guys, that is all of the books that I read in January, and I will go ahead and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!